Hi, Radhika. If there was ever a false start, this was it. I apologize to our viewers who had already started logging on and commenting, and then it froze. But for those of you watching on the YouTube channel, this happens to me often. But this wasn't necessarily my fault this time. But let's get back to the book and to Radhika. Radhika, you were telling us about the title. What you felt that the title was, of course, slightly, I don't want to say sarcastic, but a play on the circumstances that the characters found themselves in.
I think you said it really well. So it was a play on words, right? So they're trying to, I think, have a nuanced discussion of events as they see them unfolding around their community, around their city. Um, and they're trying to write civil lines, and here's where the pun gets a bit painful. They also live in a place called civil lines, and I wanted to portray that because we have civil lines all through India, right? So through different heritage parts of our various cities in India, and very often you see that as being traditional and maybe a step away from, say, modernity as it's coming to modern India. So these girls are trying, I think, to navigate that whole space as well. So I felt the name fit.
I find this interesting that you live and work out of London, and you're so far away from home, so to speak.
Yeah.
The fact that India, and in particular this neighborhood and Delhi and this microcosm, which is the Delhi world, was something that came to you, seeing that you live such a different life now. So, what drew you to this world of Delhi and its many shades, sitting so far away?
So we're for better or worse, we're a global world now, right? And the world is a lot smaller. Um, and in some ways we're all rooted to something, whether it's childhood, whether it's our family home we grew up in. So that will always be a draw in that sense. But equally the themes I discuss in this book are fairly universal, right? It's dysfunctional families, or families that are looking to make their peace, of people who have been impacted by an event, an epochal event in their lifetimes or in the lifetime of someone they've loved. So that's a pretty universal theme. So I could be sitting in London or Delhi or wherever it is, and I think people would be able to have similar experiences. I don't think that distances me from say the characters in this book.
And this is the time of pandemic and lockdown. I know London has had a pretty severe lockdown. In fact, I think it lasted much longer than ours in India. Is this a? I mean, silver linings at a time like this? A good time, so to speak, for you to write this book?
Advaita, you cut out. I think what you said was, did I write it during the pandemic or did I find the pandemic?
Yes, I wanted to know whether this was a good time for you as a writer to kind of, write the book and, edit it. I know you edited most of it during the pandemic, during the lockdown. But how did that serve you as a writer, this unusual circumstance that the whole world really finds themselves in?
You know, funnily speaking, the lockdown probably brought me closer to the characters, right, who had this earth-shattering event take place. And they've had to navigate it and find kind of solid ground and stable ground while everything's moving around them. And of course, for the last year and a half, we've sort of all been doing that, right? Trying to navigate the well, you can't say post-pandemic world, but the pandemic world, right? And we've had to stay within our homes. We've had to change the way we interact, not and everyone sacrificed as well, right? So we've been through all of this. And I think it made me empathize more with these ladies who have lost something but are trying to rebuild and trying to build to recalibrate, to show resilience, and to build a brighter tomorrow for themselves in spite of what they've suffered. So I found a lot more resonance with their story during lockdown.
Mhm. And your characters are predominantly women.
Yeah.
How was the process of giving them a different voice? Sometimes that's difficult to do when you have multiple characters in a book or a film for that matter. A lot of times when you're writing it, the characters may end up sounding very similar to each other. How did you work around that? Because your characters in this book definitely have a distinct voice and a personality, which I think was quite well done.
I'm very, very glad to hear this because, as an oldest child, so I have a younger brother. I I think I was pretty didactic through our childhood, and as many older children are. So this is always my worry that the different characters will not have distinct voices. But again, I mean, I think I come across a story or an idea, and then I'm pretty paralyzed until the characters sort of walk into my consciousness, and then they sort of take on a life of their own. So that part almost is beyond me. So the idea, the story has to percolate in my head, and then when the characters manifest themselves, that's when I'm allowed to, as it were, to set pen to paper.
This is often asked of fiction, right? So I will ask you as well. How much of this book is autobiographical? How much of it is pure fiction? Do you have a percentage? Do you have a line that you draw?
This book is not autobiographical at all, and it's purely set in fiction. I mean, it's inspired by people, by places, but those are just cues, right? Is there a bit of me in one of the sisters? Yeah, sure, maybe. I mean, people who know me would probably be able to judge, but I don't know if I can delve inside myself, or if I have the self-awareness required to do that. But certainly I empathize more with one sister over the other. And just to put this all in context, there is a girl who's London returned to Delhi. So there's one obvious connection. She's living with her sister. I don't have a sister, so that's not a commonality. But she's living with her sister, who she feels is very defeatist in attitude. But both of them are at a loose end in Delhi, in this house in civil lines in Delhi that they've inherited, and they decide to relaunch their mother's old magazine that had folded, um, and they find themselves able to do that. And I find one sister's reactions probably more similar to the way I would react in real life, and the other one's reactions probably a bit alien to my way of thinking. But I think it was useful, spending time, as it were, with someone who's so different to me, and like I said, alien to me, but to be able to understand a bit more about her motivations just by writing out her feelings and her thought patterns. So that was I think a useful exercise for me as well.
I mean, I have a sister, so I can tell you this: relationships between sisters can be complicated and up and down, probably more so than they would be between a brother and a sister, because just of the gender dynamics or things like that, or the female energy, as some would say. So,
Yes.
seeing that you don't have a sister of your own, how did you kind of internalize and sort of express the battles that they have in the pages of this book? Was that difficult to do? Was that something that came easily? Was it based on observation or possibly relationships that you've seen? What was that like?
Well, I have friends I know with sisters, so I've seen a bit of that interaction. But when I went to college, I boarded, and it was a girls' boarding college, as it were. And so there were, gosh, not just one sister around, but millions of sisters you couldn't get away from. You had to share resources, bathrooms, etc., etc. Get ready at the same time, share secrets, etc. So you had to negotiate a very, very similar pattern. Obviously, with me, after 3 years, I was able to get away. So it's not
Hmm.
quite like a family dynamic, but it allowed me enough. And I have cousins, cousin sisters, and again, so though you're not tied together in a family home in the same sort of way, you understand, and you understand. You mentioned female energy, and I think women who are close and are having to live together bring a different energy to their interaction. That was very, very interesting to delve into.
And to just for the interest of my readers, because I have a lot of people who watch who are interested in writing and publishing their own books, could you tell us a little bit about your own process of finding a publisher? And I think that would have been a little challenging because you lived abroad. And what was it like finding a publisher in India? What can you take us through your experience with that?
I think um, my kind of really main champion is my agent, who lives even further away from India. She lives in New York, so she's not local to me either. But I think we've had a very, very nice relationship um, for many years, and she's a very, very good um, person to bounce ideas off, to bounce kind of projects off. And she really is my guru, when it comes to suggesting which publisher would be a good home for whichever book. So I trust her implicitly, but for people who are looking to approach this, yes, I mean, I think the key thing is to find a good agent. So an agent who understands your writing, who understands the journey you're looking to take, right? Either as a writer or the sort of stories you're writing. So research up what publishers they're pitching to, what sort of books they're selling, and then try and make an informed and an educated pitch to them. Very often their websites will provide very useful links in terms of how to approach them. But yeah, with publishers, I think I was very fortunate to find not only Simon Schuster but my editor, who I think really, really championed the book, and I think understood the sisters, their dynamics, and which was harder for him to do because he's a man, but he really, really, really championed the book, and I feel fortunate to have landed where I landed.
And do you read the reviews of your book? I'm always curious to know if writers actually read them. And I mean, I don't very often. So,
I tend not to too much, because also, I mean, partly if anyone's engaging with the work, I think that's a positive in any way, right? If someone has um, genuine and kind of heartfelt views on the book, because you can like a book and not say anything about it, but you have to either love it or hate it to write something about it, right? So I think that in
it's
itself is
worse
some
to
sort
be
of
ignored.
connection. Sorry?
It's worse. I said it's worse to be ignored. Actually, that's what.
Right, there you go. So there is some sort of reaction. So it is finding some connection with an audience. Also, when you write a book, it almost sort of is out of your hands, right? I mean, it's living in the reader's imagination. And they're interacting with it in their own level. So I think, for me, my work in terms of writing the book is done. And it's nice that it gets to live on in people's imaginations, and then I can't ask for anything more.
And seeing that you're based in London, which is a literary capital of the world as well, there is a lot of conversation that's ongoing in the lit scene about appropriation and
Yeah,
about, taking over the voices of certain characters who may not come from your own lived experience. It could be
yeah.
gender, it could be race, it could be anything else. What is your take on this? How do you feel about this? Being a writer of fiction, and of course, championing the imagination and the fact that you can, as a writer of fiction, live many lives when you're writing that book.
And I think what you've just said at the end is key to all of it, right? You have to be able to imagine other worlds. I mean, my debut novel was a book on the partition, and though I am Punjabi from what is now Pakistan, so I have some sort of background, familial background in the
Mm-hmm.
area. My God, I wasn't around in 1947. So, I mean, anything I wrote was cultural appropriation. I sort of imagined how people were also research stuff. So I mean, it wasn't a blind act of writing, but it wasn't my story I was writing. So I was removed from it. I think it's very, very important to be culturally sensitive. So whether it comes from talking about or writing about a different race or a different religion or a different gender or a different class, whatever it is, or yeah,
Sexuality, whatever it may be.
yeah. So I mean, I can't inhabit certain skins, but if I can imagine it and if I'm trying to portray it sensitively, that then I think, yeah, and honestly, and if you can do that, I think there's something to be said for 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 doing it. Though I have to say, my first writing project was when I was a tween, I'd say, and the Gulf War was going on, and I wrote this kind of diary about a little boy in the Iraq War, in the first Gulf War, and I showed it to my
Mm.
father, and he said, "Beta, no, this is very good, but maybe you should write about what you know." So there is a bit of that as well. There is a bit of
Parents
that as
always.
well. You have to, and he did it in the nicest possible way because obviously he didn't want to discourage me. But I mean, I knew nothing about that child, right? I was writing from a bedroom in Delhi, and so my experience was very different to that poor little boy's experience. So this is to say you have to write something that is realistic as well and is
Mm.
sensitive too.
Mm. No, that's interesting, and I think just for the benefit of my viewers, you've also your father was in the foreign service. He
Yeah.
retired as an ambassador, and that meant that you lived in many different countries during the course of your childhood. Maybe not in all of them, but you definitely visited when he was posted in different parts of the world. How has that contributed to your journey as a writer? And also,
Well,
I must add, you're actually a finance professional. That's your where you come from,
yeah.
and then you took this move, made this move into writing. So just to keep my viewers informed. Yes, go ahead, Radhika.
So I'll kind of tackle the finance to writing. I think that's a well trodden path. You get many writers who find they want their voice in another profession. So whether it is diplomats, so there's a rich literary tradition of diplomats turning to writing, of finding they're also writing. Same with financiers, same with doctors. So people who find a release, right, in
Mm,
expressing themselves in from a different profession. When it comes to my childhood and my father's profession, I think it had an indelible impact in the way I see the world and the way I see characters. And in some ways, I have I have always been able to see whichever country we've lived in or I've visited almost from the outside. And maybe that's been my interaction partly with India too, with Delhi too. Just because I was always going from Delhi felt like somewhere I was always able to come back to. So that was a special relationship, as it were. But everywhere else, I think I was able to come in, observe people's interactions, see how they lived, how they interact, and I think that's had a very formative experience on me as an adult and on me as a writer too.
mhm. And was it a big decision for you to make to move from finance to fiction? It's something that a lot of people wrestle with. These kind of decisions, where you take such a big turn, and you're right. I mean, of course, there are people from the field of finance who are in writing. Chetan Bhagat, for one,
Yeah,
who's very popular and well known in India, and
yeah.
in fact has a new book coming out this year as well. But your own process, your own journey, was it difficult? Was it easy? Did it take some convincing yourself, your loved ones? What was that like?
Uh, yeah, I mean it took I think the biggest battle was with myself because I went from a profession I was qualified for, I was doing well in, um, and there was structure to it. I mean, you get in your work, you're, I don't know, 80, 100-hour weeks in the beginning, but you're working, and it's goal oriented, right? With writing, it's very different. You form your own structure. You wake up in the morning, you don't have to get out of your pajamas if you don't want to, right? You literally need a pen and paper, your laptop or whatever, and you can set to work or not work. You can work from anywhere. um you can work from, I don't know, a small table, a cafe, wherever, and you don't have to interact with people to work. So it was a whole different change in mindset, right? It's a very, very insular process, writing long form fiction. And I went from a very, very interactive, very, very almost alpha male environment to something that was, I mean, this is going to sound very grandiose, but to a profession of the mind, I don't mean it's a loftier profession than say finances. It's just very, very different. It calls in different strengths and different reserves. So I think it was more me grappling with, look, is this something I want to do? Is this something I can do, this shift? Will I be happy spending so much time on my own? And so you have to build in different structures. You have to make sure you're able to socialize within the community, as it were. You have to make sure you get out enough, and you build in these structures in terms of your day and your scheduling as well. But once you've done that, I think, and if you're able to make that shift, because like I said, that I found to be the biggest shift for me. But once you've done that, and if you're able to do that, then I think you get a lot of, I think, joy also from the act of writing.
And coming back to the book, I mean, when do you know that it's ready? It's ready to go out to the agent in your case, and there's nothing more you can do on it or with it, and you're ready to sort of start sharing it with the world. When do you know that as a writer?
Well, the glib answer in this case is when the pandemic hits, right? I I sent it off to my agent saying this is the final thing, after pretty much after the first lockdown, which was, I think, around the 24th or the 20th of March in 2020. And I have two kids. The kids had just been sent home from school, everything turned virtual for a few months, and we had to, like I said, recalibrate. Like the two sisters in this book, we had to recalibrate and refocus, make sure no one came in to the home for a few months. So it was a very, very unnerving time. And I think the writer's temptation is always to say, no, no, I'll give it another read. I'll go through another draft. This doesn't seem perfect. Or this one's voice still isn't quite there. But in some ways, the pandemic allowed me to say, okay, fine, we can now draw a line under it. But also, I think it's very useful to have these dreaded things, deadlines, right? Because that helps focus your mind as well and say, okay, fine, you need to stop now. Otherwise, the temptation is always to keep going on and on.
And this is an interesting question from one of our viewers, and I think it's very relevant to these times, in these times of woke. And I know in the West, the woke pandemic, epidemic, culture, whatever you want to call it, has really taken hold. So Axel Shenron, one of our viewers, is asking, I have written a lot of my version of science fiction like Mahabharat. All the stories are the same, just the war and places are more cosmic and sci-fi war. Do you think people will accept this? And he also wants to write it. He's sort of scared, he's saying, to write it in the web comic format because of any kind of backlash that he might get. So I think this is an interesting question because as writers, be it fiction, non-fiction, or even series or films, there is that sort of little voice in the back of your head that's saying, how are people going to react to this? Is this going to be politically incorrect? Am I going to be on some hit list? Am I going to be cancelled? Do you think about that as a writer? And do you have any advice for this reader of ours, or viewer rather?
Um, what I found is of late, people have become a lot more thin-skinned, and I'm not talking about you and me or the reader or the viewer as a creator. I'm talking about the intended audience or the intended readership. So I think it's easier to find a flaw in the telling of something or in the portrayal of something, and then, like you said, really, really come out against either the creator or the concept. We're also living in a digital age, which is great because you and I and the audience can connect right now, but it also means that people are enabled or find themselves enabled to express themselves or express their displeasure in a way you wouldn't normally do in a real life setting. So that has both pros and cons. But for the viewer, yeah, I mean, if this is something you feel you have to write, um, write it, test it on, I don't know, a focus group, whether it is your family or your friends or whoever, and then try it out.
Yeah, and get a good lawyer.
Yes.
Just in case you
And a
offend
thick skin, and a
anyone.
thick skin, yeah.
Thick skin. I know you need a really thick skin because I learned this the hard way because I started off as a novelist and then I moved to film writing, and when my first film was released, and this is pre like active Twitter days. Twitter was there, but it wasn't what it is today.
Right.
And when my first film released, I kid you not, Radhika, there were 300 reviews, and about 55 to 60% of them were negative. I mean, it was like a
You know,
slap in the face.
they connected with you, and this is what you have to bear in mind, because you know you've unearthed such a visceral reaction in someone, right?
Hmm, hmm.
That's that has to be a positive.
Yeah.
Obviously, you want everyone to love it, right?
And
There is.
in our country, I've realized politics, films, books, everyone can write them, play the game, do the politicking, and everyone has a comment on them. So you have to develop a thick skin. I think that's really good advice from Radhika, and I would certainly endorse that in more ways than one. What are you working on now?
I am, and this is to the point I just made about always being tempted to do another draft. I'm working on this collection of short stories set in the Delhi street I grew up in. Um, though this collection is set during the first lockdown in Delhi. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm imagining the lives of these fictional characters in the street I grew up in.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and seeing how they responded to that first lockdown and everything being shut down, people not being able to, I don't know, hug strangers. You know, the people who live on their own, the people who live in unhappy marriages, people who live in happy marriages and are very, very happy to be locked down with their loved ones. This was, I guess, in that time, my only way of being able to get back to
Hmm.
Delhi or to that locality, and I'm starting now to come to an end of the first draft, and hopefully the editing process is not too long drawn.
Rahul Khanduri, another viewer of ours, is asking, well, he's thanking me first for touching on different topics. I know it feels refreshing and enriching. Could you please ask her if her financial exposure, I mean, he probably means in the world of finance, had an impact on her writing as well, and how?
Uh, no, and I wish I could um, answer differently, because you know, like I said, my training was all in economics, and I went into finance, but the truth is my hours were so long and so intense. Um, that I really during those years, I think I probably read one book a year. So that was a really, really barren patch for me in terms of any engagement with culture, with literature. I was there for rom-coms. And you've read my book, you know, it's not, well, I mean, that there is a rom-com bit in it, but it's not a
But
rom-com.
of that,
Uh,
yeah.
right? But I was not able to engage with any sort of uh, you know, cultural output, because I think I didn't have the headspace for that. So that the finance side of things certainly did not contribute to my writing. But yeah, sure, like a lot of my childhood or my travel and understanding different people and how they lived and how different and how similar we really are at the root of it all was probably much more formative for me.
But then, did it make you more organized? I would imagine if you came from a
Oh,
high
yes.
stressed
Actually, there were
finance
two things.
background. Yeah.
Yeah, so basically I'm such a Germanic Indian. So I'm able to, and not only that, I started thinking about turning to writing when my firstborn, my son, was about 18 months old. Now, he wasn't a good sleeper when he was an infant, so I didn't have much time. So I had to learn to organize myself very, very well.
Hmm.
So and that's when the banking kind of training came in. You have very, very long hours and you have to learn to subsist basically on a lot of caffeine. Um, and keep on doing it day after day after day. So my infant who didn't really let me sleep so much in those early years kind of required a similar sort of discipline from me. And yes, that I was absolutely able to call on my finance background for that.
Hmm. Hmm. Someone wants to know who is this beautiful woman. She is a writer. Her name is Radhika Swarup, and she is married and lives all the way in London. So, to answer your question in brief.
London, and I can't tell you what a technological kind of thing it is that we are able to connect right now. Because, like I said, I'm right now on holiday in this part of this country of the UK where there is almost no technical connectivity. So I'm in this little tiny part of the house where there is connectivity, and I have this laptop balanced on a windowsill. So luckily, fingers crossed, this is all working. But it was touch and go for a while.
And how is moving on in terms of the COVID situation in the UK? What is that like right now?
Um, I think there is more hope, more optimism here. I think enough people are vaccinated. You have, as you have all across the globe, you have enough people who are kind of vaccine deniers or anti-vaxxers. And that's the struggle that will slow down progress here. But it feels like things will open up, and the hope is that children are able to be vaccinated, which they can't right now. 16 and above can be vaccinated, but not younger people. So you're hoping for some sort of data to come out to show that it is,
Hmm.
substantively safe for the younger population. But things are starting to open up as they inevitably must, right, across
Hmm.
the world.
Right, I know. I mean, here as well, we had a terrible wave, as you are aware, in the month of April,
Yeah.
and a similar wave is taking over in the US right now. The same Delta variant is sort of, Oklahoma City. I read was out of bed, so it's a really difficult time, and I think just books and writing is an escape. It always has been for me, but I think in these times, I think it's even more valuable than it ever has been. I want to thank you, Radhika, for coming in and joining us at Kaleidoscope. And I'm going to have you back when your new book is out. And you look like you will have the time right now to do it. You seem to be in a place that doesn't have internet, so I think you should get more writing done.
There you go. If not now, then when? But no, it was an absolute pleasure to connect with you again, Advaita, and to talk about these
Hmm.
these characters in this book. And ultimately, what I'm drawing from this book right now, Civil Lines right now, is that there is hope, right? So
Hmm.
these women have been witness, or in a generational way, to trauma, as I think the world has been, right, at this time. But there is regrowth from that, and there's regeneration from that. And I think that has given me a lot of positivity. And now that intense finance phase for me is behind me, I'm finding connecting with books, and books that are at this time giving you some sort of positivity is really the need of the hour.
Hmm. There's one last question. I'm going to quickly slide it in.
Yeah.
somebody wants to know. I think you can answer this well because you do have multiple characters in your book who are also have a strong point of view. So the question is, please elaborate whether I should concentrate on the point of view of one character or multiple characters like the Mahabharata, which does. What do you think is better for a beginner as a
Um,
writer?
I would say probably not even the long form, right? Maybe start with a short story where you can express even I don't know, a snapshot, right, of a moment or a time or an interaction. I would start with that. Whether you express yourself with one character, two, or several is up to you. But I would then build it up from that because your time commitment on a short story is arguably less than for a long form kind of attempt, and then you can build up from that. But yeah, I mean, very often what you'll find is as you're developing the plot, you will see what is more realistic for this particular project, whether it's one point of view or several.
And on a more practical sense, I think you'll find this a lot with thriller writers, for example, like Harlan Coben or someone like that, who will name a chapter after a character. So,
Yes, yeah.
as a reader, when you move from chapter to chapter, then you move from character to character. So, say
Yes.
if in your case, Axel, since you're writing on the Mahabharata, your one chapter is Krishna. So then you'll be speaking, telling that part of the story from Krishna's perspective. And then it's like a relay race, and then you can probably move on to Arjun. So then your next chapter starts with Arjun as the headline, and then you can tell it from Arjun's perspective. So you can move your
Oh,
story
yes.
along from one character to the other by structuring your book in that way. So yeah, all the best though. Sounds interesting.
That does sound
Remember,
interesting.
get a lawyer if you're going to dabble.
Oh, yeah. The
Yes.
Mahabharata, yes.
I'm just joking. I mean, people are going to be offended no matter what you write. So just get strong with, as far as that is concerned. Like Radhika says, get a thick skin. But thank you so much, Radhika, for taking on these questions. It wasn't part of the plan, but you've been very sporting with sharing some of your advice. With, like I said, a lot of people want to write, and it's wonderful for them to interact with a writer like yourself. So thank you for being so generous with your advice and time.
No,
And
my absolute pleasure.
Civil Lines is the name of the book. Radhika, do you have it with you?
I have a copy here with me, so
So
yeah.
I have the PDF.
There you
So
go.
there you go. There's a copy of Civil Lines. It's of course available in all local bookstores as well as on Amazon, which is where one orders from nowadays. And really, I mean, Kindle. I found the joy of Kindle because I just don't have any more space in my home for books. So do give it a read. I think you're going to enjoy it thoroughly. It's got a really pacey flavor to it. So I like, it is literary in the writing, but it is also pacey like you would want from a paperback. So it has that nice combo. So do give it a shot, and I'm sure you'll enjoy reading it. And Radhika, thank you so much. Have a great day. Stay safe. I'm hoping you're
Yes.
vaccinated.
Double vaccinated, no vaccine denial here, but yeah, and hopefully you are too.
All right. Okay. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for watching Kaleidoscope. And we shall, of course, be back next week with another book and another writer and try and bring you as much diversity as we can in the world of books. Thank you for watching. As always, we'd love your questions. We'd love to take them live as well as get our guests, our writers, to weigh in with their personal advice and their process. And read more, write more, and see you next week. Thank you.